I welcome you all for the second webinar of the series. Okay, myself, Niroshini. I'm from the Academic Solutions team at Vartana. So we are conducting a series of webinars to support schools in imparting excellent education to students. So in that series, last week we did see about SMART goals and implementation. I hope it would have been useful to you. So today we will be looking at teaching and learning practices in order to make your classrooms better. And also I recommend all of you to stay till the end, wherein we provide you a feedback form. Kindly fill it with appropriate information so that we will be sending you a certificate in the with the registered email address. So let us start the webinar without any delay. For today, we will be looking at today's session objectives, then effective teaching methods, what are those? And we'll be concentrating on teacher-centered method and its implementation. And then we'll also look at student-centered methods and its implementation. And then, as I said, we will have a short feedback form in the end, and then we'll close the session. See broadly what is the objective for today. So we will try and understand effective learning and teaching strategies. And also we will be discussing about the different teaching and learning practices and its implementation in a classroom. So before going into the session, I just have another poll. I'll launch it. Launched the poll. Why do you think we need better learning and teaching strategies for this current scenario? Kindly choose whatever is the right answer. We'll wait for a couple of more seconds. Kindly vote. You see, most voted is all of the above. Yes, we need the all of the above options. It's very, very important to, like do a better teaching strategy inside the classroom. Let's look at what is effective teaching strategy. So effective teaching is nothing but the methods that are used by a teacher in order to obtain high levels of student achievement. And also these teaching methods can be teacher-centered method, student-centered method, or it could be preferably of both. So we will also look at why this effective teaching is very, very, very important. So first, it caters to different kinds of learners. If you see, our classrooms have a lot of learners. It can be kinesthetic, it can be audiovisual. So there are different types of learners inside our classroom. So an effective teaching method caters to all of these learners. And also, when we are teaching, we have to create a very active learning environment where the student and teacher interaction is the most. So this helps to create a very, very active learning environment. And also this type of teaching will develop critical thinking and problem solving skills in students. And also when we are compiling all these factors, we can always expect better behavior inside the classroom. So effective teaching is very important to adhere to all of the above mentioned points that we discussed right now. See what are the two important teaching instructional methods. One is teacher-centered method and the other is student-centered method. Now let's quickly look at what is a teacher-centered method. Teacher-centered method is also called as passive learning method. We'll see why this is called as the passive learning method. The teacher plays the most active role here, where the students play more of a passive role, where the teacher takes control of the classroom and she delivers the lesson plan, right? So she kind of, like instructs the students, like gives activities like assessments, etc. So she plays the majority of active role inside the classrooms. Teachers also take a lot of, like questions, like they ask questions in between, but it is limited. And in this method, teaching and assessing are totally two different entities. Whereas we deliver the lesson, And then we assess the child to understand whether the child has got the concept. That is something that we do in assessing. So these are two different entities in total. And when we are looking at student learning, it is measured through test scores, as I mentioned earlier, and assessments. So now let's look at the widely used teacher-centered method examples. Number one, all of us know, and predominantly most of the teachers use this inside the classroom, which is a lecture method or a direct instruction method, where we take a particular topic from our curriculum and we teach the topic, and which is based on learning goals, right? So we almost cover all the subjects through this method, where we give direct instructions to do what they are supposed to do when we are instructing them, and however we plan the activities, that goes to the child. So here, that's why we call it as passive learning method, where the teacher predominantly they predominantly be active throughout the class, and students being passive listeners, they get instruction from the teachers and they proceed. The next important example of teacher-centered method is demonstration method. So this method, if you see, this is also widely used in the classroom, especially in our science classes and mathematics classes, where we demonstrate how to do experiments, where we display what they are supposed to do, how they are supposed to do, and evidently, observe, being passive listeners, they observe what is happening and then they do their work. So predominantly these methods are used for maths and science, wherein we demonstrate the problems or experiments in front of them. The last comes dictation. We generally do this in our classroom a lot, where especially in the lower grades, where teachers, dictates and the students writes the words. So this basically happens in language classes in order to improve vocabulary. And I think most of the schools introduce vocabulary in such a way to, understand the vocabulary as well as to memorize the vocabulary. Let's see how this method is generally implemented. So introducing a new topic, whenever in the curriculum the teacher introduces a new topic, this method is used. And also complex concepts, like if at all there is a complex topic that the child has to know, then this method is predominantly, this is how it is implemented. Examples like mathematical theorems or solving equations, like I said, like science experiments, etc. And also these methods are broadly used in both primary and secondary grades. And how this is implemented, teacher has a constructive lesson plan, or she prepares a pattern to deliver it in the classroom. And also teacher takes a lot of does a lot of check for understanding by asking them appropriate questions, or initially when they start the lesson, they talk about the previous topic, knowing, in order to test the prior knowledge of the child, right? So all these things will happen inside the classroom. And also, as I mentioned earlier, we use assessments to check mastery. So teaching remains as a separate entity and assessment remains as a separate entity. Now let's look at the benefits of this particular method. So here the teacher has the majority of the control. As I said, she's the most active participant inside the classroom. So the learning process becomes streamlined because the teacher decides what has to go on what time, whether it is a test or a topic, whatever it is, the teacher decides what has to go next. So this is a very streamlined learning process. And then because of this kind of environment, she retains the maximum control with her. So it is conducive to discipline. So there will be behavioral issues, but it is very, very minimal. And it is very easy for the teacher to plan these kind of lessons because teacher delivers the lesson plan. So it's easy to plan. And through this method, a lot of topics can be covered because a lesson plan is delivered. We do check for understanding questions. Yet the students remaining as passive learners, we kind of check the mastery only through assessments or homework or activities like that. So the next day, obviously, the teacher goes to the next particular topic. So a lot of topics can be covered in such a way. But in this method, we have a couple of points to remember. Like we need to ask a lot of questions when the classroom interaction is happening in order to keep the children engaged. This would definitely avoid the boredom for certain students, because students being passive listeners in this methodology, they often tend to get bored very quickly. So we need to ask as much of questions, as well as we need to have a very structured lesson plans, including like a couple of quizzes in between, etc., so that it will keep the classroom interactive. So it need not be very lengthy, it can be even short, like 1 or 2 quiz points, etc., like that. So now we'll quickly see the next method. Before that, we will open the forum for discussion. I would like to ask you a question. What are some of the teaching strategies that you practice in your classroom, and why do you practice those strategies in your classroom? You can raise your hands to answer, or you can post it in your Q&A chat box. I will read it. Kindly use the hand raise button so that I can unmute you. Also put your answers in the chat box. Okay, I see playing games, quiz starters, energize. These are some of the strategies that you use. Okay.
Hello, did I am audible to you, ma'am?
Yes, sir. Kindly go ahead.
Myself, Saurabh, principal of Seven Hills Central College. The basic strategy that I used to tell the teachers to use in classroom, that you make the arrangements of the seat so that is comfortable to the students, and it should not be boredom. The seating plan must be changed according to the activities that are being designed in the school, that has been designed in the classroom to provide a better environment so they can learn easily.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing, sir. I have one more. I can see a lot of responses in the Q&A chat box. Fun-based learning, yeah. Kid-friendly, real-life examples to take my class more interactive. Absolutely. Activity-based learning, great. Sure, ma'am, I'm allowing you to talk. Kindly unmute yourself to talk. Wait for a couple of more seconds, Diksha ma'am. Unmute your mute button to talk. Okay. Meanwhile, weekly twice we have classes under the shades outside the class to make it more effective. Absolutely, the learning environment is very important for the children to learn. So that's one strategy. Collaborative learning, absolutely. Activity-based learning, do it yourself. We'll come to it. Asking questions from the previous class, yes. Debate method, absolutely. Yeah, all these responses, thank you so much. We are about to look at a very interesting method, like we discussed earlier. We would have seen it in the earlier slides, which is called as a student centered method. So this is more of an active learning space, where student becomes more an active participant, and the teacher as well. Because teacher here becomes a coach or a facilitator in order to support the student learning. And also the teacher plays this coach role in order to make the concept also for this child to understand the concept as well. So here the teaching methods here would be looking like they are interconnected. The teaching and assessments methods are interconnected. Learning is measured by teacher instruction. Here, teacher is also an active participant, where teacher imparts the instruction how to do this. So teacher will again be an active participant here, and the children will also be an active participant. So the student outcomes is measured by formal and informal assessments, such as group projects and student portfolio. For example, if in case we are conducting a group discussion, that actively students would participate and exchange their opinions and views, as well as in group projects, they tend to share their ideas, and they take responsibility and they start doing the project when they are performing in group or in a pair of two. So when we are actually measuring that kind of student learning outcomes, we can always go back to our student portfolio and see how the student outcomes, how the student performing. We can always look at that way. So let's see widely used examples of student method. What are all the important methodologies that we need to use for a student-centered method? And let's look at the first method. It is inquiry-based learning. Second would be concept mapping, then problem learning based learning method, and then think, pair, and share. These are widely used methodologies in student-centered method. Let's start with inquiry-based learning. So this is basically an active learning method where children are encouraged more to ask questions. To ask questions, why? To understand the concept better. And then they conduct research on it and explore new ideas. So this is basically inquiry-based learning where we encourage the children to ask a lot of questions. We encourage before that, I also wanted to, note that when we are introducing inquiry-based learning, we need to train the children to uh, uh, ask more questions. So before that we will be giving a patterned guiding questions. I will take you through it, and then in the process of learning they will also understand how to ask questions, why I need to ask questions. So post that, in the process, after once they get the concept of inquiry based learning, students will automatically start asking questions when we introduce a topic. What is this? Why is this? Is it relevant, etc. So we'll quickly look at the model. So the model one would be, the first step in this model would be posing real questions to them. Like what do I want to know about this topic? How do I know it? And what do I need to know about this topic? And what could be an answer? Why these questions are posed for the children is that it can be an option that the child already knows this topic or has some knowledge about this topic. So by asking questions, the child actually triggers his earlier knowledge about the topic. So when the topic is, given to them, they have some knowledge. If not, that's absolutely okay. They can find the resources and then they start asking questions to understand it better, which is the second stage, where it is what kind of resources they need to use and where do they find them. Is this information valid and who is responsible for this? So when we delegate them on a group, it is very easy for them to ask these questions and delegate the work, and they can share the work and start doing the research process. Once the research is complete, once they know enough information about the topic, or through the resources that they available, they know what it is, they have to interpret this information. How far they are understanding this information? For that, we need to guide them with a certain set of questions. As I said, when we are introducing this model, we need to guide them with certain set of questions, like whether this information is relevant to my answer. Because when they are reading a material, it tends to be in practice, they either memorize it or they start doing rote method. So they need to understand whether whatever piece of information they are trying to process, is that relevant to the topic, or what parts of the concept supports the answer that they are looking for, and do they know any information in prior about this, and what parts, this is very very important guiding question, what parts do not support the answer, they need to just leave it off. So they need to understand this process of interpreting the information, and then finally when they are trying to summarize and get the concept inculcated, at that point of time comes the fourth stage, which is report finding. What is my main point? What am I trying to highlight in this concept? What is the broad piece of this concept that I need to know? And who is my audience, and what else is important in this concept? Am I missing anything? Am I missing any detail? Or how does it connect with the answer? So all these questions will really help to summarize the concept of learning. Now let's look at, so we saw a pattern of guiding questions, which when we are introducing the model, we need to give these guiding questions. So that's where the teacher plays this facilitator role, where she guides them with the questions, how to answer them. We need to model it. So first, let's see in a simple way how to strategize this inquiry-based learning. So generally, we need to start with the question and then allow them to explore, such as do they know this earlier, or have they heard it somewhere, etc. Or when they are in group, they get a chance to like discuss with the partners or the group members. So we need to encourage the discussion. Do they know any information on this particular part? And if not, then we like kind of give them resources. It could be like it could be a handout, a book, or a piece of information from the book itself, or an online material, anything it could be. So we need to provide them adequate resource to figure out this research part, and then we kind of summarize what we have learned and arrive at an answer. So this is the process of like the inquiry based learning, and where this is broadly used. So we kind of tend to come across a lot of strategies in the recent trends. So we need to know where we can apply these. So starting from like science experiments, inquiry based learning works best at science subject. So we can use it for science experiments like like I've given a couple of examples here. If you look at the slide, floating ice, photosynthesis process. So they know the topic, or it can be they don't know the topic. So they can involve this process to understand the concept better. Also, if you look at mathematical problems, geometry especially, where they need to understand the process and then like they have to reflect on it. Sometimes theorems and mensuration also. So as I mentioned, this is also applicable for both primary and middle school. Now let's quickly look at an example where I have given a science example for inquiry based learning. Here, if you look at the example, so we see identification of liquids is the activity where they have to just figure out which liquid is which. So we will provide children with like resources to do this experiment and to understand, to arrive at an answer. So we will follow a template to like discuss how they are going to do it. So before that, we'll quickly see what kind of resources we need to provide to do this activity. So they just need 3 plastic bottles, and we need to like fill the 3 plastic bottles with 3 clear liquids such as water, dish soap, and vegetable oil. It can either be it can also be other clear liquids. And then what process will the experiment follow is the like you can fill the plastic bottles initially with same amount of liquids, in different liquids in each bottle, and then you can just number the bottle but not saying, but which means not labeling what is what. And then you can tell your students like you can look at the bottle and then gently shake it or roll the bottle, and then they can also take off the top and smell it to understand what liquid it is. And they can also very importantly, when we are doing experiments like this, you also need to say what they are not supposed to do. So they need not taste the content. So that also should be an explicit instruction. So once that is done, you can tell your students that they can number their papers that we have given to them, like 1, 2, and 3. And now they're supposed to start identifying the liquids from each bottle. So the students will be paired up in groups, and then you can start the inquiry-based model template. If the student strength is very limited inside the classroom, this can be performed individually also, but a group activity will give them a lot of shared ideas and knowledge. So let's see how the template looks. As I said, we need to provide them with guiding questions when we are introducing the topic to them. So some of the guiding questions I have put down here would be like, what is the smell of the liquid? What color is the liquid? Where do you think it is used? And how do you know? So simple questions in the initial phases will make them understand very easily what is what. So if you go to the second column, why do you think this liquid is this particular liquid? We need to reason out why do they think that this is this particular liquid. And then we need to record the responses to summarize and arrive at an answer, like which bottle has which liquid. So if you see, these are the recorded responses that students have put, where like in bottle 1 they have felt the smell is odorless. I'm just going to stick to one example and then proceed. Odorless, and then the liquid is colorless. we can see this everywhere and it is in daily use. So it's pretty simple for them to identify that that is which particular liquid, because they have like, why do you think this is this particular liquid? They have noticed that these are the changes that are seen in other bottles too. So they feel that bottle number 1 is water. So like this, we can conduct as much as like activities for inquiry based model. For science, inquiry based model can be used for mathematics also, when we are dealing with problems. If in case if we think that this has multiple like multiple solutions, or it can be a topic where it can involve research and discussion, then obviously we can design the same pattern for mathematics as well. So this is a simple example for inquiry based model. So now let's look at what are the important benefits of inquiry based model. So when we talk about like students doing research, and now if you have seen, they are actively participating, they are discussing it with their partners, they are understanding what the partner thinks. So for example, if the partner thinks that like this liquid is this, he has his own reasons, and the A partner has their own reasons that this is this particular liquid. So they exchange their ideas, why this is this liquid and why this is that liquid. So there's a lot of exchange of ideas, which improvises their learning experience. And then it also improvises better conceptual understanding and analytical skills. It also, as I mentioned, since this is an active learning method, definitely student participation would be high, and it encourages a lot of creativity in students. And also when we are giving them experiments or problems like these types, then it really connects to them with the real-time world. So these are the most prominent benefits of using an inquiry-based model inside a classroom. Also, when we are using these techniques inside the classroom, especially at the first time, then we need to have a couple of things in our mind when we are implementing such a model. Some would be, like teacher has to have very strong knowledge about the topic. So teacher has to do one full round of research, understanding what is what and what kind of guiding questions would be appropriate. So why this is important? Because teacher is the person who facilitates, who guides this entire process. So that is very important. And she also needs to have appropriate resources to conduct these type of researches. So I did see a lot of activity based learning teachers have mentioned in the chat box. So a lot of you would do activity based learning. So we know what kind of resources would best suit for this particular activity. So we should always be like provide appropriate resources to increase the student productivity, and every student in one particular group should be able to access those resources. That is also very important. Also, teacher in the classroom setting, teacher might know who's a very like active student, who is a little shy or a timid student. Then we can concentrate on those particular students to like enhance their learning patterns as well. Or either we can also have a strong buddy in the team, so that she also encourages the other person to actively involve in the pattern. So these are some of the benefits and things to remember for an inquiry based learning model. So the next method, as we see in the student centered pattern, would be concept mapping. So some of you might be familiar with concept mapping. Here in concept mapping, all of us know that this is generally we use a lot of visual organizers in this pattern that helps to understand the new concept. Also, these graphic organizers will have like will have patterns where it helps the students to think conceptually, whether this particular concept is relevant, where it has to go. These graphic organizers push the students to think in that aspect. And also we need to include a lot of guiding questions, like I keep saying and reinforcing, from inquiry based model, where the questions will encourage the students to think. Even if they don't know the topic, sharing of knowledge will push them to understand whether this is the right like relevant content and what does it look like. So these are some of the examples of guiding questions. We look in the process how it looks like. So where can you use these kind of concept mapping? So especially for history, geography concepts, science concepts, and even literature reading. So especially when we talk about history or geography, where there are a lot of like content where it includes dates, a lot of categories, etc., detailed like points and views for them to remember. So children generally start this habit of memorizing these things, and like they again jump into this technique of rote learning to remember all these things. So this concept mapping will definitely help them to like visually look into the concept and remember them in a much better way, reducing like rote learning techniques. So some of the examples that I have given here would be like like when we take a condensation cycle or a global warming method, we could easily draw that into a diagram and like think this is what comes after this, and then we can lay out the points late just below that. So likewise, this concept mapping can be used for both primary and middle school. Now let's look into how do we strategize this method, or how can we apply this method. So this is very, very simple, exactly like like building flow charts. So let's see how this is done. So basically, when we identify the major idea or the concept, that becomes the core of the concept mapping. And then we organize these ideas into different categories. These will be broad categories, where after in each category, informations will be mapped under it. So again, we will be using like a flowchart. We'll be using lines and arrows to connect these categories to understand which is connected to which particular category. And then we will share and reflect the connections of this particular map. And using this strategy, it's very easy for the children. Like I said, they need not go back to this hard memorizing techniques or learn. So they can just summarize these ideas, and they will be visually presenting it in their mind also, that this is the concept looks like. I've given you a sample concept mapping technique where we'll be discussing a climate change and how the other supporting details are categorized here. If you look at the climate change, the broad categories would be evidence, causes, and solution. What causes the climate change? So then comes the further subcategories. If you look at the diagram, I have mentioned it there. And if you look at the evidence, what evidence do we have that this is what is causing the climate change? Those again would be like, like subcategories of evidence. And then if you look at solution, then we have two subcategories. What kind of solutions can we provide to control this climate change? And then once we figure out the solutions, those solutions can also be into like as much as subcategories that it can. So like this, if we lay out the concept for the child, it is very, very easy for them to understand. Also, it deepens the understanding of one particular concept. Now let's look at what could be some of the benefits concept mapping will have, and what can be where this has to be like applied and where not. We will also look at it. So when we talk about the benefits of concept mapping, as I keep mentioning, it deepens the understanding. Children will get strong concept knowledge, and then limited rote learning. And also, since they are discussing it with their partners or discussing it with their pairs, or the teacher can actually, like facilitate when they are discussing it, they're asking questions, then this has a shared knowledge and ideas that they get from each other. This again has a lot of topics can be covered using concept mapping. What has to be very, very prominent while we are doing concept mapping inside the classroom is that this definitely can be used for short or medium length topics or processes, but definitely not for a very lengthy topic, because when we are trying to create a concept map, the visual representation might look messy. So there'll be a lot of categories. I would like to go back to the previous slide and explain. So if there'll be a lot of categories here, and then it might look messy, and students might, like forget a couple of important details. So when it comes to this particular process, very important and crucial to apply this only for short and medium length topics. So I have covered two important topics in student learning method and in student learning method. So I will quickly launch a poll here. to engage with the audience, launching a poll. Kindly answer the poll. It's just to like understand whether both the concept mapping as well as inquiry based model is clear. Some of you have voted as concept mapping and some of you have voted inquiry based mapping. So the right answer is inquiry based model, because we start with a questioning pattern, then we explore, we do a lot of research to understand it, then we discuss it, and then we provide the right kind of resource, and then we summarize to get the answer. That's why this is inquiry based model. Thank you so much for participating in the poll. We'll quickly go back to the other methods. The next important method, I think a lot of you would have come across this prominent method that it has become a recent trend of problem-based learning. We will take up a problem, we will understand what is the important fact, what are the important things that have to be covered, and then we will look at the problem, we will research it, and then we arrive at a solution. This is also a very active learning method for a student, where again teacher is a facilitator here. Also, this is one of the most independent form of teaching and learning a topic for both student and teacher. So, as a facilitator here, the teacher has to have a very, very positive reinforcement, because it's important. Why? Because it's important. Since we are giving a problem to the child, it can be a real-time problem, or a problem that exists. We want to know about it further. You can also use it for the current topics in our subject. So children might come up with possibly a lot of solutions. So it is viable that like there are a lot of right answers, as well as there might be answers which are less relevant. But teacher has to have a positive reinforcement and push their thinking to arrive at the relevant answer. So that's why we say a lot of positive reinforcement is required when we handle problem-based learning. So generally, a problem is assigned, and then we identify what do we want to know. So when a problem is given to the child has to first identify what they really need to know about the problem. Once they know to like understand the facts, and this is what the essential problem is, then they learn about what are all the effective methodologies that can be used to like come and arrive at a solution. They apply what they already know, or they research and they know that this is what the whole problem is and how do I find a solution for it. So where these kind of problem-based learning is used predominantly is science concepts. You can use it for mathematics and even for social science. I have clubbed a couple of examples in the later slides so that you can understand how it is used in math and other subjects. So predominantly these, we encourage you to give real-time problems such as pollution control, global warming, or you can also tie up to other real-time world problems for them to understand the problem and creatively come up with different sets of solutions. How this pushes the student creativity and logical thinking. So this can be applicable for middle school as well as high school. Now let's look into the implementation part, how this can be implemented. So if you see, there are 4 stages to implement problem-based learning. Like I keep stressing, first the child needs to understand the problem and identify the problem. Whatever the problem statement that is given to the child need to break it down and understand that this is the exact problem, because there will be a lot of factors to each and every problem statement. So that's why we recommend to understand and identify the core problem and then form solutions to it. Then devising or making a plan. Once we know what is the problem, children need to start to make a plan. How will I approach this problem and how do I find solution? So what do I need to do? So that's what is thinking and then doing. So that's what we need to do here in making the plan. So they will come up with, for example, if we take a simple mathematical problem, how do I approach this problem? Do I need a flow chart? Do I need a diagram to this? How do I, like make the representation? How do I make it? Should I, like as I said in the problem statement, if it has a lot of adding factors, do I use all these data points or do I consider all these conditions? all these things while they're devising, we need to like tell them that this is what they need to understand these essentials very very importantly, and then they need to carry out the plan. Once the plan is made, they need to start implementing the plan and check in each step whether we are making any relevance to our solution, what kind of solution we want to approach, are we making any relevance. And then we need to, once the solution is framed, checking the solution is very very important, and also understanding is there any alternative method, or is there any like other method to resolve this, what are those methods, how does that look like. So when we put the children through this detailed process, child gets a very very deep knowledge about concepts, and also child gets to think a lot in a critical standpoint, where he uses his logical thinking skills and analytical skills to come up with the best solution. Now let's look at a sample mathematical problem. I've just pulled a probability problem here. And how do we, because this is a common topic that we use it inside our classrooms. How do we take this one particular problem and try to solve it in problem-based learning methodology? So child will obviously understand the problem first. He will understand what the problem is, what is the type of the problem. So we know that this problem has come from probability. So the statement here, like states, this is the problem. And I have attached this example in the handout that you will receive after the session. You can go through what is the problem, where this comes from probability, and probability has a lot of concepts like sampling with and without replacement, etc. So he needs to get all the, as I said, he needs to get the sufficient information that is enough to start solving the problem. So that's why we have laid out information here. And once they start making plan, they need to stick to the, like appropriate information. So this has sampling with replacement is the most is the method to, it is the information that we need to look into and start resolving the problem. So what kind of method that has to be used? We have to use multiplication law method, and then we carry out the process. We start solving the problem, and then we arrive at a solution. And now, as I mentioned in the process, we need to go back and check the answer whether this is the correct answer. So we advise the students to check the calculations, whether the probability that we have reached is right or not. Similarly, we have another example for social studies. So this is a real-time problem that we have pulled for, like for encouraging children to take more like critical thinking skills and do a bit of research on what they know about it earlier and how do they represent it. So as I mentioned here, we set a particular budget for the children, and we ask them to plan for a road trip. For example, let's take from one state to another state. So let's imagine that the set of students are traveling on a road trip from Chennai to Rajasthan. So we have to consider what are all the elements that they will require, and they also need to understand how do we set out the budget in the appropriate way to finish the road trip, and also in this process, what are they going to do in the road trip? Just are they going to travel, or are they going to explore the details of these states and understand how the demography is in such a way? So these are some of the like dynamics that we could create for the children. And also you can give them guiding questions like I have mentioned it here. And the important key point is that they also need to learn about important monuments or whatever interests they wanted to explore in this particular road trip. So first component, as I mentioned in stage one, would be understanding the problem. And you see, there are a couple of guiding questions that what do they want to learn, or they need to know first, where am I traveling? Because each student groups will be forming different sets of plans, as I mentioned, and they have already been given a budget. So what is the basic cost to travel and the other amenities? So we will devise the plan next. So they will start planning what are all the requirements that would be like appropriate to travel and everything, and then they will start to carry out the plan. Okay, in day one, how many days are they going to go? All these will sit with the planning. And then how many days they are going to go, after which what are all the places they are going to cover in day 1 and what are all the places they are going to cover in day 2. They will start to carry out the plan with like possibilities of what can happen and what might not happen in mind, especially like weather forecast. We will never know what will happen, so they have to make considerations while they are making the plan, and when they are carrying out the plan, this will automatically flow in place. And then when we finish making the plan, we will look back at the like solutions that we have made. What are all the alternate plans that they need to come up with? If in case if there is a obstacle that is happening, have they made any alternate plans to mitigate it, or what are we supposed to do in that sort of time without like any hustles? Okay, is there any other way to cut down the cost? So this will all improvise. These guiding questions are important for the children to understand, to arrive at a particular solution. So this is basically another example for social studies. You can devise any plan like this, or any real-time plan like we discussed in the earlier slides. You can give them global warming problem and how that could be mitigated. So you can give them real-time problems to them and ask them to come up with the solution. But when we are introducing methods like this, definitely we need to give them what kind of guiding questions would be appropriate for them to like start these practices, so that they can discuss with the partner. So initially they will not be able to come up with their own questions, so we need to get them into a practice how to start answering these guiding questions. Let's look at the benefits of this problem based learning. So there are a couple of benefits here, which would be either independent thinking and logical thinking, because they come up with their own like thought process and their own learning model. So they will increase, it will automatically increase the critical thinking, as well as almost all the students would be participating in one particular group. They will be responsible for like making the plans and discussing it with their partners. So when the teacher becomes a facilitator, it's important for them to also involved in the discussion when students are happening. Students are like discussing it with their groups. Teacher, being a facilitator, has to understand what kind of discussions are happening, how they are actually leading these discussions, which will also help the teacher to understand whether they are going in the right direction. So student participation is very active in this model, and as I mentioned, it encourages a lot of creativity and it connects them to the real time world, because a lot of facts they read it from the book. They also need to stay updated what is happening in the outside world, and it improvises the learning process because it's an active learning method. Also, when we are doing these kind of methods, we have to remember that like an appropriate set of research is backed by the teacher, so that children will achieve maximum results. And this model itself is a bit like it has to have an ample amount of time, because you cannot finish this kind of discussions or arrive at one particular solution in one class. So but this is a very effective method for children to improve their critical thinking skills and independent thinking. So what we could do is, when we are picking a real-time solution, we can split this into either 2 days or 3 days and give them 2 stages to cover in one particular class and another two stages to cover in another particular class. And then they can have a discussion with the classroom. What is, like what stands out when all of them start discussing with each other? Students will also understand other perspective of other groups. So this is very, very important, and it's a very prominent technique to improve thinking. Last model for today that we will look at is think, pair, share. This is also a very, very vitally used model. So this is very simple. You can introduce it in your daily classroom itself. When we are delivering lessons, it's easy to introduce this model into your system, which like again pushes the students to be an active learner inside the classroom. Wherein this is a very collaborative learning strategy, where when you are actually asking a question to the student, this is how the process goes. First, when we ask the question to the student basically starts thinking about their questions, and then we pair them with a partner of 2 or 3 people in one group, and then they start sharing their ideas about what they know about this topic. If a child doesn't know about this topic, it's absolutely okay, because the other 2 children will obviously share their ideas. So the child will get a perspective of what this concept is about. So you can introduce it in the beginning of the lesson, or in the middle of the lesson, or in the end of the lesson. When we are introducing it in the beginning of the lesson, obviously the topic should be a topic where the question should be more of a previously tested knowledge. So when we are introducing it in the middle of the lesson, already we have discussed some parts of the lesson, and you can ask them, why do they think like this? What made them think that this is why the reason is so? You can introduce it in such a way. In the end of the lesson, you can always introduce this like you do it in the beginning to summarize the concept. To understand or to check for understanding, you can always introduce it in the end as well. So this can be used across all subjects, and you need to start off with simple questioning techniques during the class, and this is applicable across all grades. So it's very, very simple. Let's see how we can implement think pair share. As I mentioned, we have a set of questions in mind. Before starting class, I did see a lot of you can ask will ask questions about the previous topic. So you can have a set of question, or one question or two questions, not more than that. And then you describe the purpose, like why we are doing this model, why this is going to work effectively. And then initially, when you are introducing such topics, you can call a student and model the procedure. So now this is the question. I'm going to first think. Now I have a partner. I'm going to discuss this with my partner, and then I'm going to share it with a larger classroom. So this is basically think, pair, share. This tends to be very, very effective, where children are instantly discussing among themselves and reasoning out the ideas. So I have covered almost all subjects here with examples of think, pair, share, where in one particular subject we take English. So when we are teaching a lesson, it could be a simple lesson. We are discussing the characters in the lesson. Then in the middle of the session, if you want to understand, like what do they think about the character, you can ask simple questions. Like I have put a sample question here. If you were Red Riding Hood, what would you do at a critical situation, and how would you escape from the fox? This will push the children to come with their own perspective, and it encourages them to connect them with the text as well as text with the world. So this is one model of using think, pair, share. I would like to cover another model in math, where some math problems can have multiple solutions. You can arrive at the solution in a multiple way. So this is the best method to ask the children, like if we are working out a problem, once we know what is the problem, you can ask the children, is there any giving them a question, like what does this symbol mean, and can we arrive at another solution in the same pattern? What method do you know? So questions like this will push them to think other possible solutions. This can be an interesting technique for them to check the answers also using the alternative method. So I have given examples for social studies and science as well. These examples are also there in the handout. You can refer it to them. So benefits of think, pair, share. Children will be able to filter information when they are discussing it with their partner, and they will also draw conclusions from it. So this also builds collaboration, and they will, since we are starting this, or if we already are doing it excellent, if we are starting it, then building collaboration is very, very important on what topic they are discussing, how is their understanding level, and they will also learn to listen to the other partner of his perspective about this particular topic. The last part of this think, pair, share is that we need to also remember a couple of things. Is that we need to set guidelines before we introduce models like this. We need to set discussion time, and this would be sharing time. This would be thinking time. So whenever we are posing a question to the student, we need to tell them that this is your thinking time, and now you can turn back to your partner and start discussing your ideas or sharing your thoughts. That would be discussing time. Once the discussion is over, Now we are going to share it with a larger class. So this is how the model should start getting implemented. So once they know their expectations, how they are supposed to, be actively participative in this kind of model, once or twice it might be little difficult, it might become chaotic, but in the later part, it will definitely help the children to, come out of that nutshell and start sharing their ideas and thought processes. So we did see about two different methodologies of teaching. One would be teacher-centered method, and another would be student-centered instruction. Where in teacher-centered, if you see, we have a big set of curriculum where it is broken down into different units, and then we start doing instruction process. Wherein in student-centered instruction, we give them a topic and student answer and solve their own questions as well as problems, and they come with particular set of solutions. Herein, the emphasis is broadly on accumulation of the facts in teacher-centered method, whereas here the student, once they get to understand the concept, they start applying these skills. They start applying this knowledge to arrive at a solution. So this pushes them to be more active. And if you see in teacher-centered instruction, it is more of the children being passive listeners and teacher being very, very active inside the classroom. A lot of chance for one-way communication, and also this basically it will include lectures and direct instruction, demonstration and dictation like we discussed in the earlier slides. This broadly would be like models like we discussed just now, like inquiry-based learning. It can be small group discussions, problem-based approach, etc. So these are the broad differences between teacher and student centered learning. I would like to discuss with all of you, like we've seen two different teaching methods. One is teacher centered method and another is student centered method. What kind of method do you think would be best suited? I would like to take from you, and then we will see why this is very, very important and why we are going to use particular models when necessary. I would like to open the forum. You can record your responses in Q&A. Okay, student centered. Okay. Thank you so much. I can see raised hands. Swati ma'am, I've allowed you to talk. Kindly unmute and say your opinion, which method would be best suited. You can see a lot of student-centered method. Yeah, it's the need of the hour, especially after COVID. Very true. Every child is different. Student-centered method, TPS. As situation demands, very, very true. Student-centered method. Swati ma'am, have you unmuted yourself? I'm going to give option to Amdeep Kaur sir. Your hand is raised. I'm allowing you to talk. Sir, we can hear you. Swati ma'am is speaking now. Ma'am, can you hear us? And just see a couple of responses from the Q&A box, and then we'll move. All right. Thank you so much for all the responses in the Q&A box. So yeah, we require a student-centered method as well. But we also did see about teacher-centered method while we are introducing new concepts to the children. It's also equally important when we handle complex subjects. It is very essential for us to first introduce the topic or the new material to the children, and then we proceed. There might be some complex formats where the children would find it very difficult if we are not giving appropriate or enough information, especially when it comes to mathematics or literature. It's important that we model that to the child. So I did see a couple of responses like need of the hour as situation demands. It's very true. So we need to have a view in such a way that both the methods are important. So we need to understand which method would be appropriate at what time period. So accordingly, we need to apply. So let's look at the learning pyramid, how active learning, plays a vital role for the children to understand, and how active learning is also important for them to, understanding the concept. So if you see, there is 5% of lecture and 10% of reading and 20% of audio visual and 30% of demonstration. All these are the percentages here are, how the children grasp this. So if you look at demonstration, when we are doing science experiments, children try to model us and they learn it. But obviously, sometimes what happens is that they might miss out the details. And once the demonstration is done, post that, again, the science experiment might not be repeated. So they tend to forget the information and retaining of information. But if you see group discussion or practice by doing or teaching others, definitely it will help the child to retain the information maximum. So whatever the concept is, we can choose the method, but also, include student-centered methods in the regular teaching as an activity, so that it's very, very important to club both the methods and teach. Also, it can be depending on the criteria, we can choose the method whichever is appropriate for the situation. So our recommendations would be by choosing appropriate model according to the need of the hour. If it's a complex topic, then definitely we can go for teacher-centered method. But like I said, we have to remember a lot of interactive questions should be there. You can include think, pair, share activities there to, prominently initiate discussions among children. And then also, to choose the method, we need well-planned curriculum. If we know that the curriculum, this is what the topic that I'm going to cover, is it complex or is it a diluted topic? Accordingly, you can choose the mode of teaching. And also, the last but not the least, you need to use effective resources to whichever model you're choosing. You need to have effective resources, especially when we are handling student-centered methodology. We need to have effective resources. If resources are not that effective, then I don't think student-centered method will work appropriately. So we need to have effective resources to do student-centered as well as teacher-centered methods, like using a lot of visual aids. And you can sometimes switch from blackboard teaching to, digital teaching, so that children get to learn a lot from visual learning as well. So we are coming to the end of the session, where we would be quickly, summarizing what did we see about effective teaching. We discussed two important models. One is teacher-centered and, student-centered learning, wherein teacher-centered, we discussed about what are the widely used methods like lecturing or direct instruction, dictation and demonstration. And we did see the benefits of it and what to remember when we are doing teacher-centered methods. When we talk about student-centered methods, we prominently saw like four important models: inquiry-based learning. Then we did see about concept mapping. Then we saw about problem-based learning, and we also saw the last model, which is think, pair, share, which is effective across all subjects. We also did see how effectively students will learn from these two methodologies and how do we choose the method. Also, so we did see about all these important highlights in the session. So thank you so much for attending this. I would like to also cover about Vartana Partners, where we provide these solutions to school, where Lead School is the partner where they integrate in innovative tech-based learning solutions, the curriculum that we provide. So if you have any interest, you can let us know in the chat box. We will help you to, we will reach out to you. And also, Kayan is a knowledge vehicle, where it's a device that has like full feature computer with data projector, and also it has a lot of interactive and creative curriculum design. So this again is another solution that we provide to schools. If you let us know your interest, we will reach out to you. So you can reach out to us through this email ID also and contact number also if you need any support from us or like solutions like Kayan or Lead. So you can reach out to us so that we will reach back to you.